The slave auction in Amluhasta was ending when Alpha King Caius saw her. 300 gold marks. That's what he paid for a child who would rewrite the laws of blood, legacy, and kingship itself. She was a teenager, maybe 15, with wrists like dry branches and eyes that burned through the dust and despair of the trading platform. While other children had learned to stare at the ground, this one looked straight through the crowd as if she could see their futures. What Caius couldn't see was that she would soon reveal a bloodline the gods themselves had tried to erase. Before we dive into Unia's journey from the shadows, I need your help. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This story gets intense, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Drop a like if you're already hooked, and comment below telling me where you're watching from. Seriously, I love seeing how far these stories travel. Are you Team Alpha King or do you sense something darker coming? Let me know. Now, let's continue. Alpha King Caius stood at the edge of the marketplace, the afternoon sun beating down on the worn dirt streets of Amluhasta. The year had been merciless across the Leakin territories. Drought had starved the lowlands, and desperate packs were selling their young to merchants, factory lords, and labor camps, all under the fiction that the children might fare better elsewhere. At 38, Caius ruled the largest pack alliance in the Northern Highlands. His fortress, Silverhull Keep, stood unchallenged. His army had never lost a campaign. But power felt hollow when shared with ghosts. His mate, Luna Darien, had been trying to bear him an heir for 12 years. 12 years of prayers to the Moon Mother. 12 years of healers, rituals, and whispered prophecies. Each failure carved deeper lines into her graceful face and deeper cracks into his authority. The court no longer whispered. They spoke openly now. What kind of Alpha King cannot father his own line? Next offering, the auctioneer barked, pulling Caius from his thoughts. A female, aged 14 or 15, worked the quarries east of the basin since age 9. Literate. Skilled with animals. I know her place. Caius looked up. A girl was shoved onto the wooden platform. Her hair hung in tangled ropes around a face smeared with grime, and her dress, if it could be called that, was stitched together from scraps so worn the original fabric had long since surrendered. Her feet were bare, cracked and bleeding from walking on stone. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They weren't empty. They weren't resigned. They were wild, sharp and feral, scanning the crowd like a wolf calculating distance, threat, and escape. She didn't look at the buyers with fear. She looked at them with assessment. And when her gaze landed on Caius, something ancient stirred in his chest. Not desire. No pity. Recognition. Bidding starts at 20 gold marks. 30, called a gruff voice near the front. Caius recognized the man Roderick, a labor boss who ran the silver mines in the southern ridge. He worked with children until their bones broke. 50, came another bid. Caius stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade through silk. 300. The marketplace fell silent. 300 gold marks could buy a warhorse, a year's grain supply, or a small estate. For a child laborer, it was madness. The auctioneer's eyes went wide with greed. 300 from the Alpha King himself. Do I hear 320? No one moved. No one dared. Sold to Alpha King Caius for 300 gold marks. As Caius approached the platform, the crowd parted. He could feel their stares, confusion, judgment, mockery barely concealed. But when he reached the girl and met her gaze again, he saw something that made him pause. She wasn't looking at him with gratitude. She was looking at him with pity. The auctioneer handed him a scrap of parchment. Name's Unia, Your Majesty. Orphaned 2 years back when her settlement burned. Been surviving on her own since. You've got yourself a hard worker. Caius folded the parchment and turned to the girl. Up close, she was even thinner than she'd appeared on the platform. Her collarbones jutted out sharply, and her arms were marked with old scars, burn marks, lash marks, and something else. Something that looked like claw marks. Unia, he said, his voice low. I am Alpha King Caius of the Silverhull Pack. You'll come to my keep in the Highlands. She studied him for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady, too steady for someone her age. What kind of work? The question caught him off guard. Most children sold into service didn't ask. They simply obeyed. Household tasks. Assisting Luna. Learning the ways of the keep. He paused. And if you refuse? Do I have a choice? You do, Caius said carefully. But winter is coming to the Highlands. The streets here are not kind to the young and alone. Unia looked around the marketplace at the other children still chained and waiting, at the merchants counting coins with hungry eyes, at the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon. When she looked back at him, something in her expression had shifted. The fire was still there, but it was controlled now. Banked. I'll come with you, then, Alpha King. The journey to Silverhull Keep took 2 days. Caius had brought his personal wagon, a sturdy transport pulled by 2 mountain horses, and Unia sat beside him on the driver's bench as they traveled the winding roads through the highland forests. She didn't speak much during the first hours. But Caius noticed she was watching everything. The way he handled the reins. The position of the sun. The trail markers they passed. The distances between villages. This wasn't a child simply enduring a journey. She was memorizing the route. You planning to run? He asked after they traveled half a day. Depends, she replied, still watching the road. On what? On whether you brought me to work or for other reasons. The quiet steel in her voice made his wolf stir uneasily. Caius pulled the horses to a halt and turned to face her fully. Unia. I need you to understand something. His silver eyes held hers. You're coming to my keep to help with honest labor. Assisting Luna, tending the grounds, learning our ways. Nothing more. Any wolf who would harm a child deserves to be torn apart by his own pack. And I would lead the hunt myself. She studied his face, the hard lines of his jaw, the scars along his neck, the weight in his eyes. Finally, she nodded once. All right, then. They rode in easier silence after that. As dusk began to fall on the second day, they crested a ridge, and Unia got her first look at Silverhull Keep. It rose from the mountainside like something carved by gods. Stone walls thick as tree trunks. Towers crowned with silver banners that caught the fading light. Courtyards sprawling between wings of the fortress, and beyond it all, the wild highlands stretching endlessly beneath a sky turning violet and gold. It's bigger than I imagined, Unia said quietly. Took 3 generations to build, Caius replied, pride touching his voice. My grandfather laid the first stones. My father expanded the walls. I fortified the defenses. He paused, and his voice grew quieter. Though it will all pass to strangers when I'm gone. My mate and I have not been blessed with children. Something flickered across Unia's face at those words, something too knowing for her years. But she said nothing. As they approached the main gates, a woman emerged onto the high terrace. Luna Darien was still beautiful at 34, with dark hair braided in the style of the northern packs and a gaze that could command a room. But there was a tightness around her mouth that spoke of years spent swallowing grief. Caius, she called as the wagon rolled into the courtyard. You're later than expected. Business in Amluhasto took longer than planned, he replied, climbing down. He turned and offered his hand to Unia. Darien, this is Unia. She'll be helping around the keep. Darien's eyes widened as she took in the girl's ragged state, the torn clothing, the dirt-streaked face, the raw feet. Moon Mother, she breathed. Child, you look like you haven't eaten in weeks. She likely hasn't, Caius said. Then we'll fix that immediately. Darien descended the steps with swift grace, her expression shifting from shock to something fiercer, something almost desperate. Come, Unia. Let's get you cleaned, fed, and properly clothed. As Darien led Unia into the keep, Caius watched from the courtyard. He'd expected his mate to accept the arrangement they needed help with, after all. But there was something in the way Darien had taken the girl's hand, something in the urgency of her voice, that unsettled him. Inside, Darien was already moving through the kitchen with purpose, pulling bread and cheese from the stores, heating water over the great hearth, issuing orders to the attending staff. Sit, Unia. That's a strong name. Did you know it means youth in the old tongue? Sit, dear, and eat while I prepare a bath. Unia perched on the edge of a carved wooden chair, her eyes taking in the kitchen's warmth, the polished stone floors, the copper pots hanging from iron hooks, the scent of herbs drying near the windows. It's very clean here, Unia said carefully. We keep a good house, Darien replied, setting a plate before her. Now eat. And don't worry, you're safe within these walls. As Unia began to eat slowly at first, then faster, Darien moved about the kitchen, chattering about the keep, the pack, the rhythms of daily life. But Caius, watching from the doorway, noticed how his mate's hands trembled slightly as she worked. How her voice had a fragile, brittle quality he hadn't heard in years. When Unia had finished eating, Darien led her up the stone staircase to the second floor. She opened the door to a small but comfortable chamber with a window overlooking the eastern forest. This will be your room, Darien said, smoothing the furs on the bed. I'll have proper clothes brought to you by morning. And we'll get you real boots. Thank you, Luna Darien, Unia said quietly. I'm not used to such kindness. Darien's composure cracked for just a heartbeat. Her eyes glistened, and she turned away quickly, pretending to adjust the curtains. Every child deserves kindness, Unia. Every single one. Her voice was thick. Now, let me draw that bath. And so, in the fading light of that autumn evening, 3 lives intersected in ways none of them could yet understand. An Alpha King haunted by the legacy he could not create. A Luna aching for the child she could never bear. And a girl with fire in her eyes and secrets in her blood, secrets that would soon crack the foundations of the kingdom itself. What Caius didn't know, as he watched Unia disappear into the keep, was that the girl he'd rescued carried a scent beneath the dirt and sweat. A scent his wolf recognized but his mind could not yet name. The scent of Lunari's blood, the forbidden lineage of wolves who once spoke to the Moon Mother herself. And the Moon Mother, silent for generations, was finally ready to speak again. The whispers began before dawn. Caius heard them as he made his morning rounds through the low voices in the servants' corridors, hushed conversations that died the moment he appeared. By the time the sun crested the eastern peaks, the entire household knew, the Alpha King had brought home a human girl. A purchased human girl. 300 gold marks for a child laborer, muttered Gregor, one of the senior guards, as Caius passed the armory. The old wolf didn't realize his king's hearing was sharp enough to catch every word. Has grief made him mad? Caius said nothing. Let them whisper. He'd endured worse judgments than this. But as he climbed the stairs to the residential wing, he caught fragments of sharper talk, the kind that carried edges beneath the words. Can't give him an heir, so he brings home a replacement? Luna must be humiliated. Probably some bastard he sired in the lowlands. Caius's jaw tightened. He should have expected this. In a court where bloodlines meant everything, mercy looked like weakness. Compassion looked like desperation. He found Darian in Unia's room, kneeling beside the bed where the girl still slept. His mate's hand hovered over Unia's forehead, not quite touching, as if she were afraid the child might vanish if she made contact. Darian, he said softly from the doorway. She straightened quickly, composing herself. She barely stirred all night. I checked on her twice. You should rest. I'm fine. But her eyes were rimmed with red, and her voice carried the weight of sleeplessness. Caius, the household is talking. I know. They think she stopped, swallowing hard. They think you brought her here because we can't, because I can't. Caius crossed the room and took his mate's hands. They were cold despite the warmth of the chamber. Let them think about what they will do. You and I know the truth. Do we? Darian's voice dropped to a whisper. Do you even know why you bought her? 300 gold marks, Caius. For a child you'd never seen before. He had no answer for that. The truth was, he didn't fully understand it himself. All he knew was that when he'd seen Unia on that platform, something in his wolf had insisted. Not with desire or possessiveness, but with an ancient certainty he couldn't explain. She needed help, he said finally. That's reason enough. Behind them, Unia's voice cut through the tension, clear and awake. Luna is right to question you, Alpha King. Mercy is expensive in your world. They both turned. Unia was sitting up in bed, the furs pulled around her waist. In the morning light streaming through the window, cleaned of dirt and dressed in the simple cotton shift Darian had provided, she looked even younger than 14 and somehow far older. How long have you been awake? Darian asked, her tone shifting to something gentler. Long enough. Unia's gaze moved between them. Your household thinks I'm a scandal. They're not entirely wrong. You're not a scandal, Darian said firmly. You're a child who needed refuge, and we provided it. That's the end of the matter. Unia tilted her head, studying Luna with those unervingly sharp eyes. Is it? The question hung in the air. Before either of them could respond, Unia slipped out of bed with surprising grace. You said there would be work. I should start. After you've eaten, Darian insisted. And after we found you proper boots. The days that followed established a rhythm, though it was an uneasy one. Unia proved to be everything the auctioneer had promised and more. She rose before the household stirred, helped in the kitchens without being asked, tended the herb gardens with a knowledge that surprised even the keep's healer, and moved through her tasks with quiet efficiency. But she spoke little. When the other servants tried to engage her in conversation, she offered only the minimum required: a nod, a brief answer, nothing more. She didn't eat with them in the common hall, preferring to take her meals alone in the kitchen after the others had finished. What she did was watch. Caius noticed it first on the third day. He'd been reviewing reports from the border patrols in his study when he glanced out the window and saw Unia in the courtyard below. She was supposedly sweeping the stones, but her eyes were tracking the guard rotations. Counting the minutes between patrols. Noting which gates stayed locked and which remained accessible. She was mapping the keep's defenses. Not with malice, Caius sensed, but with instinct, the survival calculations of someone who'd learned early that knowing your exits meant the difference between life and death. Darian noticed something else. On the 5th evening, she pulled Caius aside before supper, her expression troubled. "I found her in the library this afternoon," Darian said. "She was reading the genealogy records. The old ones, from before the Great Pack Wars. Perhaps she's curious about our history." "Caius, she was reading the original texts. In Old Leakin. I didn't even know she could read that dialect most scholars can't." Caius frowned. "Did you ask her about it?" "I tried. She closed the book and said she was just looking at the pictures." Darian's voice dropped. "But there are no pictures in those records. Only names and bloodlines going back 12 generations." That night, Caius decided to speak with Unia himself. He found her in the kitchen after the household had retired, sitting by the dying hearth with a cup of tea. She didn't seem surprised by his appearance. "Can't sleep?" he asked, lowering himself into the chair across from her. "Sleep is a luxury," she replied. "I'm still getting used to the idea that it's safe here." "It is safe. You have my word." She met his eyes over the rim of her cup. "Words are wind, Alpha King. Safety is something you earn, not something you're given." The cynicism in her voice was jarring, too weary, too knowing for someone her age. Caius leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "How long were you on the streets before the auction?" 2 years. Maybe 3. I lost count after the first winter." "And before that?" Something shuddered behind her eyes. "Before that doesn't matter. The auctioneer said your settlement burned." "Many settlements burned during the wars." Her voice was flat, practiced. "Mine was nothing special." But Caius's wolf stirred restlessly. She was lying not about the fire, but about the significance of it. There was something she wasn't saying, something that made her pulse quicken and her scent shift toward fear. He changed tactics. "Darian tells me you've been reading the old records. I can stop if it bothers you." "I didn't say it bothered me. I'm curious how you learned Old Leakin." Unia was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost distant. "Someone taught me. A long time ago. Before the fire." "A scholar?" "Something like that." At night, Caius began hearing her voice through the stone walls, low murmurs in a language he couldn't place. Not Old Leakin, but something older, something that made his wolf pace restlessly in his chest. He mentioned it to Darian one evening as they prepared for bed. "I hear it too," Darian admitted. "At first I thought she was praying, but it doesn't sound like any prayer I know. It sounds like she's answering someone." "Answering who?" "I don't know." But Caius." Darian turned to face him, her expression troubled. "There's something not right about her. Not wrong, but different. Haven't you noticed? She never seems surprised by anything. It's as if she's waiting for something to happen." Caius had noticed. But he wasn't ready to name what he sensed in the girl, that odd recognition his wolf felt, the way her scent carried traces of something wild and ancient beneath the human surface. The moment of truth came on the 8th evening. Darian had invited Unia to join them for a private supper in the small dining chamber, an attempt, Caius suspected, to make the girl feel less like a servant and more like, what? Family? The thought made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. They ate in relative silence until Darian, pouring wine, asked the question that had been haunting her. "Unia, dear, I realize we've never actually asked how old you are." Unia set down her fork carefully. She looked from Darian to Caius, her expression unreadable. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear, and every word fell like a stone into still water. "Old enough to remember what the wolves forgot." The room went cold. Darian's hand froze mid-pour, wine splashing over the rim of the cup. Caius felt his wolf surge to the surface, every instinct suddenly alert. "What does that mean?" Darian asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Unia held her gaze. "It means I know why the moon went silent. Why the old bloodlines died. Why are some prices paid in fire instead of gold?" She paused. "And it means I know what you've lost, Luna Darian. I know the shape of the emptiness you carry." Darian's face went pale. How could you possibly?" "Because I carry it too." Unia's eyes glistened, but her voice remained steady. "The knowledge of things that should have been but never were. The ghosts of futures that will never come." Caius leaned forward, his voice low and commanding. "Unia. What are you?" She looked at him then, and for the first time since he'd bought her freedom, he saw her mask slip. Beneath the careful control, beneath the cynicism and the survival instincts, there was something raw and terrified and achingly young. "I'm the last thing my bloodline left behind," she whispered. "I'm the answer to a question no one remembers asking. And I'm the reason your enemies will come for you, Alpha King, whether you send me away or keep me close." The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Caius spoke, his voice rough. "Then I suggest you tell us everything. Because if enemies are coming, I'd rather face them knowing the truth than stumble into war blind." Unia's laugh was bitter and broken. "The truth? The truth is I don't fully know it myself. All I know is that I dream in a language that shouldn't exist anymore, and when I sleep, something ancient whispers through me. Something that recognizes you, Alpha King. Something that's been waiting for you." Darian stood abruptly, her chair scraping against stone. "This is madness." "No, Luna." Unia's voice was sad. "This is destiny. And I'm sorry I brought it to your door." She rose from the table and left the chamber, her footsteps echoing down the corridor until they faded into silence. Caius and Darian sat frozen, the remains of supper growing cold between them. "What have we brought into our home?" Darian whispered. Caius stared at the doorway where Unia had disappeared, his wolf howling with recognition and warning in equal measure. "I don't know," he said finally. "But I intend to find out." Outside, the moon rose full and silver over the highlands. And in her small room, Unia pressed her forehead against the cold window glass and whispered words in a language dead for 300 years, words that, if translated, would have meant only one thing. "Forgive me. The awakening has begun." 3 weeks after Unia's arrival, the whispers in Silver Howl Keep had evolved from curiosity to suspicion. It started subtly. A guard would pause mid-patrol when Unia passed, nostrils flaring as if catching a scent that didn't quite fit. Kitchen staff would exchange glances when she entered a room, their conversations dying unnaturally fast. Even the stable hands, usually too busy with their work to notice court politics, began to watch her with wary eyes. Caius first heard the word hybrid from Gregor during a morning briefing. "The men are uneasy, Your Majesty," the old guard said carefully. "The girl's scent, it shifts. One moment human, the next something else. Something that makes our wolves restless." "Restless how?" Gregor hesitated. "Not aggressive. More like recognition. As if they're waiting for her to reveal what she's hiding." Caius dismissed him with a nod, but the observation gnawed him. He'd noticed it too, the way his own wolf would quiet when Unia was near, not in submission but in attention. As if listening to a frequency only it could hear. The rumors reached the council chamber within days. Advisor Juliana was the first to voice them openly. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, pragmatic and ruthlessly protective of pack law. During a routine council meeting, she set down her ledger and addressed Caius directly. "Your Majesty, we need to discuss the girl." Caius kept his tone neutral. "What about her?" "Her presence is causing disruption. The staff reports strange occurrences, candles that relight themselves when she passes, plants in the garden that bloom out of season where she's worked. And her scent." Juliana's lips thinned. "It carries wolf essence. Faint, but unmistakable." "Perhaps she has distant Leakin ancestry," Caius replied. "Many humans in the territories do. Not like this." Juliana leaned forward. "I've lived 6 decades, served 3 Alpha Kings. I know the difference between diluted bloodlines and something intentionally hidden. That girl is not what she appears to be." Beside her, Elder Joss spoke up. He was ancient even by wolf standards, his face weathered as mountain stone. "Alpha King, I must echo Juliana's concern. If the girl is hybrid, truly hybrid, not merely descended, then harboring her violates the covenant of separation established after the Great Pack Wars." "The covenant," Caius said slowly, "was designed to prevent wolves from creating hybrid soldiers. Unia is a child, not a weapon." "The law does not differentiate," Joss replied gravely. "Any wolf-human hybrid found within pack territories must be reported to the High Council and removed. It's been our law for 300 years. Juliana pressed her advantage. "Send her away, Your Majesty. Before this becomes a larger issue. Before other packs begin asking questions we cannot answer." Caius felt his wolf growl low in his chest. "I will consider your counsel. But I will not cast out a child based on rumors and superstition." "Then at least investigate," Juliana urged. "Confirm what she is. If she's innocent of deception, no harm done. But if she's hiding forbidden blood..." "Enough." Caius's voice carried a command that silenced the room. "I said I will consider it. This meeting is adjourned." But as the council filed out, he caught Joss's parting words, spoken low to Juliana, If he won't protect the pack from this, someone else must. That evening, Caius found Darien in the gardens with Unia. His mate had taken to teaching the girl the names of healing herbs, and they worked side by side in the fading light, their hands dark with soil. "This is wolfsbane," Darien was saying, pointing to a purple flower. "Deadly to our kind in high doses, but in careful measure, it can reduce fever and calm an overactive shift." Unia listened intently, her fingers gentle as she touched the petals. "And this one?" "Moon petal. It only blooms under the full moon. We use it for," Darien paused, catching sight of Caius. "For women's ailments." Caius noted the way she'd censored herself, unwilling to discuss fertility treatments in front of Unia. The girl noticed too, her expression flickering with something like sympathy before she turned back to the plants. "Unia, would you excuse us?" Darien asked softly. The girl nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. As she passed Caius, she met his eyes briefly, and he saw the weight of awareness in them. She knew the council had discussed her. She knew her time here was measured in borrowed days. When they were alone, Darien spoke first. "They want her gone. Juliana and Joss are concerned about pack law." "Damn pack law," Darien said with uncharacteristic vehemence. "That child has done nothing wrong. She may not be entirely human, Darien. You've sensed it yourself." "I don't care if she's half spirit and half starlight," his mate said fiercely. "She's ours to protect now. We took her in. We made her safe. What kind of wolves would we be if we threw her to the council the moment she became inconvenient?" Caius pulled his mate close, feeling the tremor in her shoulders. "I have no intention of sending her away. But we need to understand what we're protecting. If she truly carries hybrid blood, the other packs will demand answers. Then let them demand." Darien's voice was muffled against his chest. "I won't lose her too, Caius. I can't." The raw pain in her words made his heart clench. He understood then that Unia had become more than a servant or ward to Darien. She'd become the shadow of the daughter his mate would never have. A dangerous attachment, perhaps, but an undeniable one. The truth revealed itself 3 nights later, under a moon so bright it cast shadows sharp as midday. Caius was in the stables checking on a mare due to a foal when he heard Darien's voice, sharp with alarm. He ran toward the sound and found his mate kneeling in the moonlit courtyard, Unia beside her, and between them a wolf pup, barely 6 months old, lying motionless on the stones. "What happened?" Caius demanded. "He fell from the rampart," one of the young guards stammered, his face pale. "We were training the juveniles in climbing exercises, and he lost his grip. The drop, Alpha King, the drop was 30 feet. His neck." Caius knelt beside the pup. The young wolf's breathing was shallow, labored. His neck was bent at an unnatural angle, and blood trickled from his nose. "A killing injury." "Get the healer," Caius ordered. But Unia was already moving. Before anyone could stop her, she placed both hands on the pup's chest. Her eyes closed, her lips moved in words too soft to hear. "Girl, don't." The guard start. Then the moonlight changed. It didn't grow brighter or dimmer. It simply gathered streaming down from the sky in visible threads of silver radiance that wove around Unia's hands like water, like smoke, like liquid starlight. The light poured into the pup's broken body, and everyone watching felt their wolves respond not with aggression or fear, but with something primal and reverent. The pup's chest rose with a sudden, deep breath. His eyes opened. And then, impossibly, he stood neck straight, wound sealed, as if he'd never been injured at all. He shook himself once, looked around in confusion, then bounded over to the guard and licked his hand. Perfect. Whole. Healed. The silence that followed was absolute. Unia swayed, her face pale, and Darien caught her before she fell. The moonlight faded back to normal, but everyone in the courtyard had seen it. "I had felt it." "Moon Mother preserves us," the guard whispered. "She's Lunaris touched." The word spread through the keep like wildfire. By dawn, every wolf in Silver Howl knew what Unia was, or at least, what her blood carried traces of. Lunaris blood. The forbidden lineage. The moon-touched wolves who'd channeled divine power 3 centuries ago and been exiled for their hubris. The bloodline everyone believed had been extinguished in the purges that followed the Great Pack Wars. That night, Caius found Darien in their private chamber, standing at the window and staring out at the moon. She didn't turn when he entered. "I saw her do it," Darien said quietly. "I saw the moonlight obey her. Like it was alive. Like it knew her." Caius moved to stand beside his mate. The legends say Lunaris wolves could speak to the Moon Mother herself. That their power was too great, too dangerous. That's why the old alphas drove them out. "And killed them," Darien added. Every last one, according to the records. Men, women, children. They showed no mercy. Yet one bloodline survived. Hidden. Diluted. Buried. Darian finally turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Caius, do you understand what this means? If the High Council learns she carries Lunari's blood, they'll execute her. Pack law demands it. I won't let that happen. How can you stop it? You're one alpha against 6 territories. If they unite against you, let them try. His voice was iron. I didn't save that girl's life just to hand her over for slaughter. Darian was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper, and the words sounded like they'd been torn from somewhere deep inside her. The gods did not curse us barren, Caius. He stared at her. What? I've been thinking about it, praying about it since Unia arrived. All these years we've believed we were being punished. That our infertility was divine judgment for some unknown sin. Darian's tears finally spilled over. But what if it wasn't punishment? What if the Moon Mother was simply waiting? Waiting for what? For us to be ready. For us to understand that some children aren't born to you, they're sent to you. For us to prove we could love something not of our blood, not of our making, but precious nonetheless. Darian's voice broke. What if our empty arms were always meant to catch her? Caius pulled his mate into his arms as she wept against his chest, tears of grief and revelation, of years of pain reframed into purpose. Outside, the moon hung full and silent in the sky, a silver witness to the moment 2 wolves finally understood the shape of their destiny. And in her room, Unia sat by the window with her knees pulled to her chest, watching that same moon. Her whispered words in the ancient tongue translated to something simple and terrifying. They know what I am now. The awakening cannot be stopped. Forgive me for what comes next. The emergency council session was called 3 days after the healing. Caius sat at the head of the long table in the war chamber, his silver eyes scanning the faces assembled before him. Juliana. Joss. 4 other elder wolves representing the major families within his territory. Their expressions ranged from concerned to openly hostile. You harbor a Lunaris descendant, Juliana began without preamble. In direct violation of the covenant of separation. Alpha King, this cannot stand. Unia is under my protection, Caius replied, his voice level. She has committed no crime. Her existence is the crime, Joss said gravely. The Lunaris bloodline was eradicated for a reason, Your Majesty. Their power destabilized the entire wolf nation. They believed themselves above pack law, above the natural order. They claimed to speak for the Moon Mother herself. Perhaps they did, Caius countered. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Juliana's voice cut through them like a blade. You would defend heresy? You would risk war between the territories because of one orphan girl? She leaned forward. Or is there another reason you're so determined to keep her? A reason that has everything to do with your own deficiency? The temperature in the room dropped. Every wolf felt their alpha's power ripple outward, a warning that they were approaching a line that should not be crossed. Choose your next words carefully, advisor, Caius said softly. But Juliana was too committed to retreat. The pack whispers, Your Majesty. They say you and Luna cannot produce an heir, so you've brought home a replacement. A divine foundling to justify your failure. They say grief has made you irrational. Then the pack can whisper to my face, Caius growled. I will not abandon a child to satisfy gossip and fear. Elder Marcus, the youngest of the council members, spoke up hesitantly. Alpha King, perhaps a compromise? Allow the High Council to examine the girl. If she proves manageable, not a threat. I will not subject her to examination like a laboratory specimen. Then what will you do? Juliana demanded. Ignore pack law. Invite the other territories to question your authority? Caius, I've served your family for 3 decades. I'm trying to protect you from yourself. By asking me to betray an innocent? By asking you to choose between one girl and the stability of your entire kingdom. Juliana's voice softened, becoming almost pleading. Send her away. Quietly. Provide her with gold and a safe passage south, beyond pack territories. No one needs to know what she is. The matter ends there. Caius stood, his chair scraping against stone. The matter ends when I say it ends. Unia remains under royal protection. This council is dismissed. As the advisors filed out, Joss lingered near the door. He spoke without turning, his aged voice carrying a warning. A king who chooses his pride over his people loses the right to both, Your Majesty. When the chamber was empty, Caius slammed his fist onto the table. The wood cracked beneath the blow. That evening, Unia found him on the eastern rampart, staring out at the darkening forest. You shouldn't be out here alone, Caius said without turning. Neither should you. She joined him at the wall, her slight frame nearly lost in the oversized cloak Darien had given her. They want me gone. I won't allow it. Why? The question was simple, direct. Why protect me? You know what I am now. You know the danger I bring. Caius finally looked at her. Because you're a child who deserves safety. That's reason enough. Is it? Or is it because you think I'm some kind of answer? Her eyes met his. A divine gift to fill the emptiness in your home? Because I'm not, Alpha King. I'm not a miracle. I'm just a survivor of something I don't fully understand. Then help me understand, Caius said. Your past. The fire. The temple you mentioned. Tell me what happened. Unia was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant, as if reciting someone else's memory. There was a place hidden in the northern wastes. The Sanctum of the Silver Veil, they called it. The last temple where the old ways were practiced, where wolves still prayed to the Moon Mother in the forbidden tongue. She gripped the stone wall until her knuckles went white. I lived there. Studied there. They said I was special. That my blood carried something precious. Who said this? The priestesses. The keeper of the flame. They taught me ancient words, showed me how to listen for the moon's voice. Her breath misted in the cold air. But others were listening too. Wolves who believed the old ways should stay buried. They came in the night, warriors wearing no colors, claiming no pack. They hunted us like we were abominations. Caius felt ice form in his chest. Hunters sent by the High Council? I don't know. I was 12. All I remember is smoke and screaming and priestesses telling me to run. Her voice cracked. The last thing I saw was fire. The temple is burning. And then, 2 years of surviving alone, learning to hide what I was, until a slave trader caught me, and the rest you know. The wolves who attacked, did you see their faces? One. Unia's expression hardened. An older wolf with a scar across his jaw. He killed the high priestess while I watched from the shadows. Before he did, she told him, you can burn the temple, but you cannot burn the bloodline. The Moon Mother's plan will unfold regardless. She looked up at Caius. He laughed and said, the Moon Mother has no plan. Only we do. Before Caius could respond, Unia stiffened. Her nostrils flared, and her head whipped toward the corridor entrance. Someone's been here, she whispered. Recently. A scent I don't recognize. Caius tested the air. She was right beneath the familiar smells of stone and torch smoke. There was something foreign. Sharp. Deliberate. How long have you noticed unfamiliar scents? 3 days. Since the healing. Unia's eyes darted to the shadows. They watch my chambers at night. I hear footsteps that stop outside my door. Shadows that move wrong when the torches flicker. Caius felt his protective instincts surge. Why didn't you tell me? Because I'm used to being hunted, Alpha King. It's everyone else here who isn't. The nightmares began that same night. The first scream tore through Silver Hull Keep at the darkest hour before dawn. Caius and Darien both bolted from their bed, following the sound to Unia's chamber. They found her tangled in her sheets, thrashing and crying out in the ancient tongue. Her eyes were open but unseeing, silver light flickering beneath the skin of her hands. Unia. Darien rushed to the bedside, but Caius caught her arm. Don't touch her. Not while the power is active. Darien's voice cracked with desperation. She's terrified. And if you touch her while she's channeling moonlight, it could kill you both. They watched helplessly as Unia convulsed, her lips forming words that made the air itself feel charged. Finally, her eyes focused, the light faded, and she collapsed back against the pillows, gasping. The fire, she whispered. I saw the fire again. And the wolf with the scar. He was here. In this keep. Her eyes widened with sudden, terrible recognition. Moon Mother. I know who he is. Who? Caius demanded. But Unia had gone pale, her gaze locked on something beyond the present moment. The scar. The voice. I should have recognized it sooner. Unia, who was the wolf from the temple? Her answer came out barely audible, Elder Joss. The revelation hung in the air like poison. Darien's hand flew to her mouth. Caius felt rage and understanding crystallize simultaneously. Joss's insistence on removing Unia, his knowledge of Lunaris law, his reference to the purges as if he'd witnessed them personally. Because he had. He knows what I am, Unia continued, her voice stronger now. He's known since the moment I arrived. He's been waiting to see if I'd reveal myself. And now that I have. Now he'll move against you, Caius finished grimly. And he's not working alone. The next morning, Darian made an unexpected announcement at breakfast. Unia will begin formal training today, she declared, her tone leaving no room for argument. Etiquette, protocol, and combat. Unia looked up, startled. Combat? You heal others, but you need to learn to protect yourself. Darian's expression was fierce, maternal. If they're coming for you, you'll be ready. Not as a victim, but as a warrior. Over the following days, Darian drove Unia with relentless focus. Mornings were spent learning table manners, proper address for nobles, the intricate politics of pack hierarchy. Afternoons were devoted to physical training: how to fall, how to strike, how to use an opponent's strength against them. Caius watched from the training yard as his mate transformed before his eyes. The grief-stricken Luna, who'd spent years drowning in sorrow, was becoming something harder, sharper. A mother protecting her young. Again, Darian commanded as Unia attempted a defensive stance. Faster. You won't get a second chance if they come for you. Unia moved with surprising grace, her body adapting quickly. But Caius could see the toll it was taking: the dark circles under her eyes, the way she flinched at unexpected sounds. That night, he found Darian alone in their chamber, staring at her hands. She's terrified, Darian said. Every lesson, every technique, she absorbs it like her life depends on it. Because it does. You're doing what needs to be done. Am I? Or am I just teaching a child how to survive long enough to be slaughtered? Darian's voice broke. What if we can't protect her, Caius? What if Joss and Juliana are just the beginning? Caius pulled his mate close. Then we fight. For her. For us. For the chance that the Moon Mother truly did send her here for a reason. In her room, Unia practiced the defensive forms Darian had taught her, moving through them again and again until her muscles burned. Outside her window, the moon watched silent, silver, waiting. And in the shadows of the keep, conspirators gathered to discuss the problem of a girl who carried forbidden blood and a king too stubborn to let her go. The storm was building. And everyone in Silver Howl Keep could feel the pressure dropping before the first lightning struck. The Blood Moon Festival had always been Silver Howl Keep's most sacred celebration, a night when the veil between the mortal world and the divine grew thin, when wolves honored the Moon Mother with ritual hunts and ceremonial fires that burned until dawn. This year, the festival carried an edge of tension that no amount of ceremony could mask. Caius stood on the main balcony overlooking the central courtyard, watching his pack gather below. Bonfires blazed in iron braziers. Musicians played the ancient songs on drums and bone flutes. Young wolves practiced their ceremonial forms while elders recounted the old stories. It should have felt sacred. Instead, it felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. She shouldn't be here, Darian said quietly beside him. Not with half the court wanting her dead. Caius tracked Unia's small form near the edge of the courtyard, helping servants arrange offering tables. She'd insisted on participating despite both their protests, claiming that hiding would only make her look guilty. She has as much right to celebrate as anyone, Caius replied. But his hand rested on the pommel of his blade, and his wolf paced restlessly beneath his skin. Below, Juliana moved through the crowd with practiced ease, speaking in low tones to various nobles. Caius watched her pause beside Lord Brennan, saw the way his expression darkened as she whispered in his ear. Conspiracy had a body language all its own. Elder Joss stood apart from the celebration, his scarred face illuminated by firelight. When his gaze found Unia, something cold and predatory flickered across his features. We should cancel the hunt, Darian murmured. Keep everyone inside the walls tonight. And show weakness? Let them know we're afraid? Caius shook his head. No. We proceed as planned. But double the guards around Unia, and keep her within sight at all times. The blood moon rose just after sunset, massive and rust-red, hanging low over the mountains like a wound in the sky. The pack howled in unison, voices rising in ancient harmony. The sound should have been beautiful. Instead, it raised the hair on Caius's neck. The ceremonial hunt began at midnight. The pack's warriors shifted and streamed through the gates, pursuing a symbolic stag released hours earlier. It was tradition the hunters would return at dawn with their prize, and the Alpha King would bless the kill. Caius remained behind with the elders and those too young or old to hunt. He'd stationed his most trusted guards throughout the keep, but as the hours passed and the courtyard thinned, unease coiled tighter in his gut. At the second hour past midnight, he found Darian in the great hall. Where's Unia? She said she needed fresh air. I sent 2 guards with her to the eastern courtyard. Darian's brow furrowed. Why? What's wrong? Caius didn't answer. He was already moving. The eastern courtyard was one of the keep's quieter spaces, a small enclosed garden used primarily for meditation. Torches burned in brackets along the walls, casting dancing shadows across the stone. Caius found the 2 guards first. They lay crumpled near the entrance, throats torn out, their blood still steaming in the cold air. His wolf surged forward with a roar of rage and alarm. Unia! The scream that answered him was pure terror. He burst through the garden archway to find her backed against the far wall, 3 wolves advancing on her in half-shifted form, too human to be mindless beasts, too wolf to hide their killing intent. Their scents were wrong, deliberately masked with ash and foreign herbs, but underneath he caught traces of the northern territories. Rogues. Hired killers. Stand down. Caius's command cracked like a whip, reinforced with alpha dominance that should have dropped them to their knees. They didn't even flinch. The lead assassin, a scarred female with amber eyes, bared her teeth in a mockery of a smile. The contract's already paid, Alpha King. The girl dies tonight. She lunged. Unia's scream was cut short as her survival instincts took over. Her hands came up defensively, and the moonlight responded. Not the gentle gathering Caius had witnessed during the pup's healing. This was violent, explosive silver fire erupting from Unia's palms in a wave of searing radiance that caught the lead assassin mid-leap. The rogue didn't even have time to scream. The moonfire consumed her instantly, turning flesh and bone to ash that scattered on the wind. The remaining 2 assassins skidded to a halt, their eyes wide with primal fear. Unia stood trembling, her hands still wreathed in silver flames, moonlight pouring down around her like a living thing. Her eyes had gone completely white, glowing with power that made even Caius's wolf whimper and bow. Lunaris Witch, one of the surviving rogues, gasped. She'll destroy us all. He turned to flee, but Caius was faster. His claws extended mid-leap, and he took the rogue down in a spray of blood and violence. The 3rd assassin made it 3 steps before Caius's fangs found his throat. When the killing was done, Caius turned back to Unia. She was collapsing, the moonfire flickering out as her legs gave way. He caught her before she hit the ground, and she clung to him with desperate strength, her whole body shaking. I didn't mean to, she gasped. I didn't. She was going to kill me, and I just... I know. Caius held her tightly, his wolf torn between rage at the attack and awe at what he'd witnessed. You're safe now. I've got you. But the courtyard was filling rapidly with pack members drawn by the screams and the scent of blood. Darian arrived first, her face white with horror as she took in the bodies, the ash, the silver light still faintly crackling in the air. Then came the others. Juliana. Lord Brennan. Marcus. And finally, Elder Joss, his scarred face expressionless as he surveyed the carnage. Moon Mother preserves us, Marcus breathed. The power, did you see? Forbidden power, Joss said coldly. The very reason the Lunaris bloodline was purged. This is what happens when we shelter abominations. Caius rose slowly, still keeping Unia behind him. His voice dropped to a deadly quiet that carried more threat than any shout. Abomination? 3 assassins infiltrated my keep during the sacred ceremony. They murdered my guards and attempted to kill a child under my protection. And you call her an abomination? She wielded moonfire, Juliana said, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. Direct channeling of divine power. It's been forbidden for 3 centuries. Because our ancestors feared what they couldn't control, Caius snarled. She defended herself against hired killers. What would you have had her do? Die quietly to preserve your sensibilities? Joss stepped forward. Alpha King, I understand your protective instincts. But you must see the reason. That display of power proves she's dangerous. If word of this reaches the other territories, then let it reach them. Caius's eyes blazed silver in the torchlight. Let every pack in the Highlands know that I harbor Unia of the Lunaris blood. Let them know she stands under my protection, by my authority, as a member of my household. The courtyard fell silent. What Caius had just declared was tantamount to adopting her, placing her under the same protections as blood family. You would risk war, Joss said flatly. You would violate the covenant. I would honor the Moon Mother's will, Caius cut him off. Or have you forgotten? The blood moon is her sacred night. And on her sacred night, she chose to grant this girl the power to survive. Who are we to question divine intervention? Juliana found her voice, sharp with desperation. The council will not accept this. The pack will not. The council will accept what their alpha commands. Caius's power rolled out in waves, forcing every wolf present to feel the weight of his dominance. And any who raise claw, fang, or conspiracy against Unia will answer to me. Not as criminals. Not as rogues. But as traitors who endangered a child under royal protection. He let the silence stretch, letting them feel the promise of violence in his words. Am I understood? One by one, the pack members lowered their eyes in submission. Even Juliana bowed her head, though resentment radiated from her like heat. Only Joss remained standing tall, his expression carved from stone. You've made your choice, then, the elder said softly. The gods help us all. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing across the courtyard. Others followed, not everyone, but enough. Enough to show that Caius's authority was no longer absolute. When the courtyard had emptied, Darian approached cautiously. She knelt beside Unia, who still huddled against Caius, her face buried in his coat. Let's get her inside, Darian said gently. Before. A howl cut through the night. Then another. And another. The hunting party was returning early. And from the sound of those howls, aggressive, challenging, they'd heard what had happened. Caius lifted Unia in his arms. She weighed almost nothing, this girl who'd just incinerated an assassin with moonfire. She felt fragile as glass, though he'd seen her wield power that could reshape kingdoms. Whatever comes, he said quietly to Darian, we face it together. The three of us. His mate nodded, her jaw set with determination. But as they carried Unia into the keep, Caius caught her whispered words. The storm's here, isn't it? This is just the beginning. He had no answer. Because she was right. The blood moon hung overhead, witnessing everything, as Silver Howlkeep descended into division. And in the shadows beyond the walls, those who wanted Unia dead began planning their next move. The girl with moonfire in her veins had revealed herself. And now, both her protectors and her enemies knew exactly what was at stake. The question was no longer if blood would be spilled. Only how much. Stop. I need to know something right now. Unia just unleashed forbidden power to survive an assassination attempt. Caius defended her against his entire court. Juliana and Joss are planning a coup. Who are you fighting for? Drop Unia if you think she deserves protection, or the council if you believe she's too dangerous to live. Don't just watch and pick a side. And if you haven't liked this video yet, what are you even doing? This story only gets more intense from here. Your engagement literally determines if I keep making stories like this. Comment. Like. Now. Let's continue. The fracture in Silver Howlkeep widened like a wound that refused to heal. In the week following the Blood Moon attack, the household divided into silent factions. Those loyal to Caius maintained their duties with tight-lipped efficiency. Those who sided with Juliana and Joss moved through the halls with barely concealed resentment, their whispered conversations dying whenever the Alpha King appeared. Caius knew rebellion was brewing. He could smell it in the air, sharp and acrid, like metal before a lightning strike. What he didn't know yet was how deep the conspiracy ran. In a forgotten storage room beneath the western wing, Juliana addressed a gathering of 20 wolves, nobles, guards, and senior household staff. Elder Joss stood beside her, his scarred face impassive as she spoke. The Alpha King has been compromised, Juliana said, her voice carrying the weight of conviction. We all saw what that girl did. Moonfire. Divine power that was forbidden for reason. And rather than protect the pack, Caius places her above our laws, above our safety. Lord Brennan crossed his arms. He declared her under royal protection. That's within his authority. Authority granted by sound judgment, Joss interjected. Not by enchantment. Think, all of you. The infertile Alpha King suddenly finds a Lunaris descendant and becomes her fierce defender? He risks war with the other territories, defies the Covenant, threatens his own council, all for a child he met barely 2 months ago? She's bewitched him, Juliana said flatly. That's the only explanation. The Lunaris wolves were known for manipulation, for bending minds with their moon-touched abilities. The girl has ensnared both the Alpha King and Luna. Marcus, the youngest elder, shifted uncomfortably. That's a serious accusation. Do we have proof? We have eyes, Juliana snapped. Luna Darian treats the girl like a daughter she birthed herself. She spends every waking hour with her, teaching her things that should be reserved for heirs. And the Alpha King. She paused for effect. The Alpha King who once led armies now plays nursemaid to an orphan. The girl defended herself against assassins, one of the guards pointed out. Are we condemning her for surviving? We're condemning her for existing, Joss said coldly. The Covenant is clear. No hybrid. No Lunaris blood. No exceptions. Our ancestors established these laws after the Great Pack Wars when the moon touched nearly destroyed civilization with their arrogance. They believed they spoke for the gods. They believed they were above wolf law. His eyes hardened. And this girl carries that same poison in her veins. Juliana leaned forward. Caius is blind to the threat because she's clouded his mind. But we still see clearly. We have a duty to protect this pack, even from their own alpha if necessary. You're talking about a coup, Marcus said quietly. I'm talking about restoration, Juliana corrected. Removing a temporary threat until the Alpha King regains his senses. Once the girl is executed according to pack law, Caius will thank us. He'll understand we saved him from his own compromised judgment. Lord Brennan exchanged glances with several other nobles. And if he doesn't? Joss's smile was cold. Then we'll know for certain that the enchantment runs too deep. And we'll deal with that problem as well. The implications hung heavy in the stale air. Treason, wrapped in the language of duty. When? Brennan asked. Soon, Juliana replied. We spread the truth first. Let the pack understand that their alpha is compromised. When the time comes to act, they'll support us, or at least, they won't stand in our way. The lies spread like poison through water. By the second week, even the loyal servants began to doubt. Has the Alpha King changed since the girl arrived? Was his judgment sound? Luna certainly seemed obsessed, abandoning her usual duties to spend entire days with Unia. In the markets beyond the keep, the whispers grew louder, the Lunaris which has enslaved them both. They say she glows at night, speaking to demons. The Alpha King risks war for her. What sane ruler would do that? Caius heard the rumors but found himself unable to stem the tide. Every public defense of Unia only seemed to prove Juliana's point that he was unreasonably attached to the girl. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. The more he protected her, the more compromised he appeared. While conspiracy festered in the shadows, something else bloomed in the light. Unia and Darian had become inseparable. Every morning, Luna would collect the girl from her chamber, and together they would walk the ramparts or tend the gardens, talking in low voices about everything and nothing. Darian taught her the Luna's codes, the ancient precepts that governed how a female wolf should carry herself, lead with grace, and temper a king's harder edges with wisdom. A Luna is not merely a mate, Darian explained one afternoon as they arranged flowers for the shrine. She is the heart of the pack. The Alpha is the sword, but the Luna is the hand. That guides it. Strength without wisdom is brutality. Wisdom without strength is powerless. Together, they create balance. Unia's hands worked carefully, placing moon petals in the ceremonial pattern. And if Luna has no children? What then? Darian's hands stilled. Then she pours her heart into the pack itself. Every child becomes hers to protect. But it's not the same, is it? No, Darian admitted softly. It's not. They worked in silence for a moment. Then Unia spoke, her voice barely audible. I never knew my mother. She died when I was very small. The priestesses raised me. She glanced at Darian. I used to wonder what it would feel like. To have someone who chose to love you, not because of duty or prophecy, but just because. Darian's eyes filled with tears. She set down her flowers and pulled Unia into a fierce embrace. You don't have to wonder anymore, sweet girl. You don't have to wonder. But as their bond deepened, Darian's health began to fail. It started with fatigue nights where she couldn't sleep, mornings where she could barely rise. Then came the headaches, the trembling hands, the moments where she'd lose her breath for no reason. Caius noticed. How could he not? His vibrant mate was fading like a flower denied sun. You need to see the healer, he insisted one evening, finding her pale and drawn in their chamber. I'm fine. Just tired. Darian. I said I'm fine. But her voice broke on the last word, and she turned away to hide her tears. Caius moved behind her, resting his hands gently on her shoulders. This is killing you. The stress, the division in the pack, the constant threat. It's not the stress, Darian whispered. It's the fear. The fear that they'll take her from us. That all this, everything we've built, everything we've found in her will be ripped away. I won't let that happen. Can you promise that? Can you promise that Juliana and Joss won't find a way? She turned to face him, and Caius saw the depth of her desperation. I'm 40 years old, Caius. I've spent half my life grieving children I'll never have. And then the Moon Mother sent us, Unia finally sent us someone to love, someone to shape and guide and protect. And now they want to kill her for the crime of being born with the wrong blood. Caius pulled her close, feeling how fragile she'd become. We'll find a way through this. But even as he said it, he wasn't sure he believed it. The breaking point came 3 weeks after the blood moon attack. Caius was in his study, reviewing border reports, when he heard voices from the garden below. He moved to the window and saw Darian and Unia sitting together on a stone bench, their heads close in conversation. He was about to turn away when Darian's words drifted up, carried on the evening breeze. "Teaching you everything I know," Luna was saying. "How to read a court, how to navigate politics, how to rule with both strength and compassion." "Why?" Unia asked. "I'm not a princess. I'm not even truly packed." "You're whatever we decide you are," Darian replied fiercely. "And I've decided you're the daughter I was always meant to have." Her voice grew softer, almost dreamlike. "If I leave this world childless, then let the gods see that I still raised a queen." The words hit Caius like a physical blow. He gripped the windowsill, his wolf howling with grief and pride in equal measure. Unia's response was too quiet to hear, but he saw her take Darian's hand, saw his mate bow her head and weep. In that moment, watching the two most important women in his life holding each other against the gathering darkness, Caius's resolve crystallized into something unbreakable. Juliana and Joss wanted a war? They would have one. But they would lose. Because he would burn his own kingdom to ash before he let them harm either Darian or Unia. That night, Caius called a private meeting with his most trusted warriors, the wolves who'd served his family for generations, whose loyalty ran deeper than politics or fear. "Rebellion is coming," he told them bluntly. "Juliana and Joss are gathering support. They'll move against Unia soon, possibly against me as well." Captain Rowan, his head of guard, spoke carefully. "What are your orders, Alpha King?" "Double the watch on Unia and Darian. No one enters their chambers without my explicit permission." "No one." Caius's eyes swept across the assembled wolves. "And when the conspirators make their move, and they will, we respond with overwhelming force. No mercy. No hesitation. They've chosen treason, and they'll face the consequences." "Some of them are elders," another warrior pointed out. "Respected members of court. Then they should have remembered that respect is earned through loyalty, not undermined by conspiracy." Caius's voice turned to iron. "I will not lose my family to politics and prejudice. Not Darian. Not Unia. Not while I am still drawing breath." The warriors exchanged glances, then as one, they dropped to one knee. "We stand with you, Alpha King," Rowan said. "To the end." "Let's hope," Caius replied grimly, "it doesn't come to that." But in his heart, he knew it would. The storm was no longer gathering. It was here. And before the sun rose again, blood would stain the stones of Silverhull Keep. The attack came during the changing of the guard, when Silverhull Keep was at its most vulnerable. Caius was in his study reviewing defensive positions when the first explosion shattered the western gate. The sound rolled through the keep like thunder, followed immediately by the clash of steel and the screams of wolves. He was moving before conscious thought, his hand finding his blade as he burst into the corridor. Darian emerged from their chamber at the same moment, already armed, her eyes sharp despite her weakening health. "Unia," she said. "I know." Caius could hear the fighting spreading through the keep, too coordinated to be a random attack, too well-timed to be anything but planned. "Stay with her. Barricade yourselves in the inner chamber." "No." Darian's voice was steel. "If they want her, they go through both of us." There was no time to argue. They ran together through the stone corridors, following the sounds of battle toward Unia's quarters. Captain Rowan intercepted them at the junction, his face grim and bloodied. "Juliana's forces, Your Majesty. At least 30 wolves, maybe more. They've breached the main hall and are pushing toward the residential wing." "Loyalists?" "Fighting hard, but we're outnumbered. They planned this well." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Elder Joss is with them. He's leading the assault personally." Caius felt rage surge through him, hot and clarifying. "Get every loyal wolf to the inner courtyard. We make our stand there. By time 4. A scream cut through the air. Unia's voice, terrified and desperate. Caius and Darian ran. They found Unia's chamber door splintered, 3 of Juliana's wolves forcing their way inside. Captain Rowan threw himself at them while Caius and Darian pushed through to the room beyond. Unia was backed against the far wall, a ceremonial dagger clutched in her trembling hands. 2 more attackers circled her like predators, their eyes gleaming with hate and righteous fury. "Stand down!" Caius roared, his alpha command rolling out with enough force to crack stone. The wolves hesitated, instinct warring with fanaticism. In that moment of hesitation, Darian struck. Her blade found the first wolf's throat, and he dropped without a sound. The second lunged at her, but Caius was faster, his claws ripping through muscle and bone. "Are you hurt?" Darian asked Unia, pulling the girl behind her. No, Luna, behind you. Lord Brennan stepped through the shattered doorway, flanked by 6 more conspirators. His expression was cold, resolute. I'm sorry it came to this, Alpha King. But you left us no choice. The girl has poisoned your judgment. For the good of the pack, she must be removed. The only poison here is treason, Caius growled. Stand aside, Brennan. You can still walk away from this. No. We can't. Brennan raised his hand, and his wolves surged forward. The room exploded into violence. Caius fought with the fury of an alpha defending his family, his blade and claws finding targets with lethal precision. Darian moved beside him, her smaller frame belying her deadly efficiency. But they were outnumbered, and more conspirators were flooding into the corridor beyond. A blade found Caius's ribs, a deep, burning cut that stole his breath. He stumbled, and Brennan pressed the advantage, driving him back toward the window. You were a great king once, Brennan said, his sword at Caius's throat. Before she corrupted you. She saved me, Caius gasped, blood staining his teeth. From becoming exactly what you are now. A coward who murders children. Brennan's eyes hardened. So be it. The sword drew back for a killing strike. And Darian threw herself between them. The blade meant for. Caius's heart buried itself in her shoulder instead. She cried out, collapsing against him, and Caius caught her with a roar of anguish and rage that shook the walls. No. Unia's scream joined his, not fear this time, but something primal and terrible. Something that made every wolf in the room freeze as ancient power responded to her terror and fury. The moonlight outside the window didn't just gather. It ignited. Later, the survivors would struggle to describe what they witnessed. Some said the moon itself descended into Silverhall Keep. Others claimed they saw the silhouette of a goddess made of silver fire standing behind the girl. All agreed on one thing: they had witnessed power that should not exist in the mortal world. Unia's eyes blazed white as stars. Her hair lifted as if caught in a wind that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. And from her outstretched hands poured moonfire, not the defensive burst from the blood moon attack, but a torrent of divine wrath that turned night into blazing day. The silver flames swept through the chamber like a sentient thing, consuming Brennan and his wolves before they could scream. The fire spread into the corridor beyond, seeking out every conspirator with terrifying precision. It burned with cold heat that left loyal wolves untouched but reduced traitors to ash in seconds. Throughout the keep, conspirators fled before the advancing wall of moonfire. Some made it to the gates. Most didn't. Juliana herself was caught in the Great Hall, trying to rally her remaining forces. The moonfire found her, and her last words were a curse that died on her lips as the flames claimed her. Elder Joss fought his way through the chaos toward the eastern tower toward Unia's location, even as his forces crumbled around him. He burst into the chamber and saw the girl standing in the center of a maelstrom of silver light, saw Caius bleeding on the floor with Darian collapsed beside him. You've doomed them all. Joss shouted over the roar of power. Every pack will unite against you now. They'll burn this place to the ground. Unia's head turned slowly toward him. When she spoke, her voice echoed with something far older than her years, something that remembered the first wolves, the first packs, the first prayers offered to the moon. Let them come. Let them see what happens when mercy is met with murder. Let them witness what the Moon Mother thinks of those who hunt her chosen in her own sacred halls. The moonfire surged forward. Joss shifted, tried to flee, but the flames caught him at the threshold. He had time for one scream before he joined the ash. The assault lasted less than an hour. When dawn finally broke over Silverhall Keep, half the structure lay in ruins. The western gate was rubble. The Great Hall's roof had collapsed. Entire wings showed scorch marks where moonfire had burned through the stone itself. But the conspirators were gone. Dead or fled into the wilderness, broken and scattered. The surviving loyalists gathered in what remained of the inner courtyard, their faces stunned, their wolves subdued by what they'd witnessed. They watched as Unia, small, exhausted, her power finally knelt beside Caius and Darian. The Alpha King's wound was grievous. His breathing came shallow and labored, and blood pooled beneath him. Darian, though less severely hurt, was unconscious, her face pale as death. Please, Unia whispered, her hands hovering over Caius's chest. Please, not them. Not because of me. Tears streaked through the ash on her face as she called on power she had nothing left to give. The moonlight responded, weak now, flickering like a candle in the wind, but present. It flowed from her hands into Caius's wound, knitting flesh and bone with agonizing slowness. The watching wolves began to kneel, one by one, until every survivor was on their knees before the girl they'd once called cursed. When Caius's eyes finally opened, the first thing he saw was Unia's face above him, exhausted and terrified and heartbreakingly young. "You saved your king," he whispered, his voice raw. "No." Unia's voice broke on a sob. "You saved me first. You and Luna Darien. You gave me a home when I had nothing. A family when I had no one. This," she gestured at the destruction around them, at the ashes of traitors, at the moonfire's aftermath. "This is just me refusing to lose you. Either of you." Caius reached up with a trembling hand and touched her face. "My daughter," he said. Not a question. A declaration. Unia dissolved into tears, lowering her forehead to rest against his chest as sobs shook her small frame. Behind them, Darien stirred, her eyes opening slowly. She saw her mate and the girl who'd become their miracle and managed a weak smile. "My family," she whispered. Captain Rowan approached carefully, going to one knee before them. His voice carried across the silent courtyard. "The traitors are vanquished, Alpha King. The pack stands ready to serve. What are your orders?" Caius struggled to sit up, Unia supporting him. He looked across the assembled wolves, loyal warriors who'd fought beside him, servants who'd hidden civilians during the assault, nobles who'd chosen their king over conspiracy. "Send word to the other territories," he said, his voice growing stronger. "Tell them the truth of what happened here. Tell them that Silverhull Keep was attacked by traitors who sought to murder a child under royal protection. Tell them he pulled Unia close to his side. Tell them that Unia is my heir. My daughter in all but blood. And any who challenge her will face the same fate as those who already tried." The silence was absolute. Then Captain Rowan slammed his fist against his chest in salute. "For the Alpha King. For Luna. For Princess Unia." The other wolves took up the cry, their voices rising to the dawn sky. "For Princess Unia." Unia looked up at Caius, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I'm not, I can't be." "You already are," Darien said softly, reaching out to take the girl's hand. "You were from the moment you walked through our gates. We just needed to catch up to what the Moon Mother already knew." As the first true rays of sunlight touched the ruins of Silverhull Keep, 3 figures sat together among the ashes of an Alpha King, his Luna, and the girl who'd burned down half a kingdom to save them. The survivors knelt in the rubble, bearing witness to the moment everything changed. And overhead, the moon still faintly visible in the morning sky watched in satisfied silence. The royal seer arrived 3 days after the night of fire, summoned by a dream she could not ignore. Sister Moira was ancient, how ancient, no one truly knew. She lived alone in a cave sanctuary 2 days' journey into the northern wastes, emerging only when the Moon Mother's voice grew too insistent to resist. She'd served Caius's grandfather, and his father before him, and her prophecies had never been wrong. She entered Silverhull Keep leaning heavily on a staff of twisted silverwood, her milky eyes seeing far more than her blindness should allow. The rebuilding efforts paused as wolves stopped to stare at her passage through the ruins. Caius received her in the war chamber, one of the few rooms still intact. Darien sat beside him, her wounded shoulder bandaged but healing. Unia stood near the window, trying to make herself small, though her presence filled the room like a second sun. "Sister Moira," Caius greeted her with respect. "Your timing is exactly as it should be." The seer interrupted, her voice like wind through ancient trees. She turned her blind gaze toward Unia, and the girl flinched. "Come here, child. Let me see what the moon has wrought." Unia approached hesitantly. Moira reached out with gnarled hands and cupped the girl's face, her fingers reading what eyes could not. "Yes," the seer breathed. "Yes, there you are. The last thread of the old weaving. The first thread of the new." "Sister Moira," Darien said carefully. "Can you tell us what Unia is? Why does she carry such power?" "I can tell you far more than that, Luna." Moira released Unia and turned toward Caius. "I can tell you why your mate's womb remained empty for 15 years. I can tell you why the Moon Mother allowed you to suffer whispers and shame. I can tell you why everything that broke you was necessary to bring you here." Caius felt his chest tighten. "Speak plainly, sister." "Very well." Moira struck her staff against the stone floor, and the sound echoed like a bell. "You were never cursed, Alpha King. You were prepared." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Prepared for what?" Darien whispered. "For this moment. For this choice." Moira's blind eyes seemed to pierce through them all. "The Moon Mother withheld your heir not as punishment, but as a sacred test. She needed to know, would you remain worthy of the gift she intended to give? Would your heart stay open even as your arms remained empty? Would you choose compassion over blood when the time came?" Caius exchanged glances with Darien. His mate's hand found his, gripping tight. 15 years ago, Moira continued, a child was born in the last temple of the old ways. A child whose lineage carried the final traces of Lunari's blood diluted through generations of hiding, but still divine. The priestesses knew what she was. They knew she would be hunted. So they prayed for protection, and the Moon Mother answered. With fire, Unia said quietly. With the destruction of everyone I loved. With a crucible, Moira corrected gently. To forge you into what you needed to become. To strip away everything except your strength and your will to survive. The seer's expression softened. The Moon Mother does not coddle her chosen child. She tempers them like steel. And the Alpha King? Caius asked. How does this involve us? Because you needed to be broken too, Moira said bluntly. Your pride, your certainty that legacy meant blood alone, these things had to be shattered. So the Moon Mother withheld the one thing you wanted most. She makes you feel inadequate. Let you suffer judgment. Let you question your own worth. Her voice dropped. And then, when you were finally humble enough, wise enough, compassionate enough, she sent you Unia. Darian's breath caught. She was always meant for us. Yes. And you were always meant for her. Moira turned back to Unia. You are both human and divine, child. The vessel through which the Moon Mother speaks again after centuries of silence. But you are also just a girl who needs a family. Both truths exist together. The test, Caius said slowly, understanding dawn. The slave auction. I could have walked past her. Bought someone else. Done nothing. But you didn't, Moira confirmed. You saw a child in chains and paid a fortune for her freedom. Not because prophecy demanded it. Not because you recognized her power. But because your heart was wounded and empty as it still knew mercy. She smiled. That was the moment you passed the test, Alpha King. Everything since has been a consequence and confirmation. Tears streaked down Darian's face. We thought we'd failed. We thought the gods had judged us unworthy. You were judged worthy, Moira corrected. Worthy to raise the Moon Mother's chosen. Worthy to protect her when the world wanted her dead. Worthy to love without the bonds of blood. The seer's voice grew stronger. What you built was not despite your childlessness. It was because of it. Your empty arms were always meant to catch her. Unia made a small, broken sound. Darian immediately pulled her close, and Caius wrapped his arms around them, both the three of them holding each other as the weight of divine purpose settled over them like a blessing. What happens now? Caius asked finally. Now, Moira said, you make it official. What the Moon Mother ordained, you must declare before your pack. Give the gift its proper name, Alpha King. Let the world know what you've chosen. The emergency council session was called for that evening. Word spread quickly through what remained of Silver Hall Keep, and wolves gathered in the half-ruined Great Hall, curious, anxious, still reeling from the night of fire. The loyalist nobles took their places at the long table. Captain Rowan stood at attention near the door. Servants crowded the galleries above, unwilling to miss whatever announcement had prompted such urgency. Caius entered with Darian at his side and Unia walking between them. Sister Moira followed, her presence lending weight and solemnity to the proceedings. Marcus, now the eldest surviving council member, spoke first. Alpha King, we're grateful for your recovery. The pack rejoices that both you and Luna survived the treachery. He hesitated. But we must discuss what happens next. The girl Unia's power is undeniable. Some suggest she be trained, monitored, kept under strict control for the pack's safety. No, Caius said simply. Marcus blinked. Your Majesty, surely you understand the concern. What she did during the attack was extraordinary, but also terrifying. If she were to lose control again. She saved my life, Caius interrupted. She saved Darian's life. She saved this entire keep from traitors who would have murdered us all. And you want to imprison her out of fear? Not imprison, another noble said quickly. Just ensure appropriate oversight. I agree, Caius said, and shock rippled through the hall. Unia requires oversight. Guidance. Training in how to use her gifts responsibly. He paused. Which is why I'm making her my heir. The silence was absolute. Your heir? Marcus repeated faintly. My daughter, Caius clarified. In all ways that matter. And the future of the Silver Howl Pack. Alpha King, another noble stammered, you cannot simply adopt. I can. And I have. Caius's voice carried the unshakable weight of Alpha command. Sister Moira has confirmed what my heart already knew. Unia was sent to us by the Moon Mother herself. Our years of infertility were never a curse. They were preparing for this moment. He turned to Unia, who stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief. Unia. Daughter of my heart, if not my blood. Will you accept this responsibility? Will you stand as heir to Silver Howl, learn what it means to lead, and one day carry forward the legacy Darien and I have built? Unia's voice was barely a whisper. I'm not worthy. Neither was I, Kaya said gently. That's what makes us perfect for the role. Darien stepped forward, producing a small silver circlet, one she'd worn as a young princess before becoming Luna. With trembling hands, she placed it on Unia's head. You are worthy, Darien said fiercely. You are brave, strong and compassionate. You are everything a ruler should be. And you are my daughter. The daughter I prayed for. The daughter the Moon Mother sent me. Then Caius did something that made the entire assembly gasp. He removed the royal crest from his own chest, the silver wolf medallion that marked him as Alpha King, and placed it around Unia's neck. Before this council and before the Moon Mother herself, he declared, his voice ringing through the hall, I name Unia of the Lunaris blood as Princess of the Silver Howl. Heir to my throne. Daughter of my house. Under my protection and bearing my authority. He knelt before her, the Alpha King kneeling before a teenage girl, and bowed his head. I recognize you as my legacy. The hall remained frozen in stunned silence. Then Darien knelt beside him. I recognize you as my daughter. Captain Rowan was next, dropping to one knee with a clatter of armor. For Princess Unia. One by one, the wolves in the hall knelt. Nobles, warriors, servants, all of them bearing witness to the impossible. An infertile Alpha King had found his heir. Not through blood, but through choice. Not through law, but through love. Sister Moira remained standing, her blind eyes turned toward the ceiling where moonlight streamed through the broken roof. The Moon Mother bears witness, she said softly. And she is pleased. Unia stood in the center of the kneeling assembly, tears streaming down her face, the royal crest heavy against her chest. She looked down at Caius and Darien, her king and queen, her father and mother in every way that mattered. I don't know how to be a princess, she whispered. Caius looked up with a smile that held all his pride and love. Then it's fortunate you have the rest of your life to learn. He rose and pulled her into an embrace. Darien joined them, and the three stood together at the center of the ruined hall, a family forged not by prophecy or blood, but by mercy, courage, and the simple choice to love. Outside, the moon burned silver and bright, casting its blessing over Silver Howl Keep. And in the shadows between worlds, the Moon Mother herself smiled. The test was passed. The gift was given. The legacy was restored. Not despite their brokenness, but because of it. 10 years later. The Moonlight Academy stood where the old slave markets of Anluhasto once operated, a deliberate transformation that Unia had insisted upon. Where children had once been sold like livestock, they now learned to read, to fight, to heal, and to lead. Alpha Queen Unia walked through the courtyard at sunset, watching young wolves practice their forms under the guidance of patient instructors. Some were orphans. Some were half-bloods who'd been rejected by traditional packs. All of them had found home here, in the network of sanctuaries that now stretched across 6 territories. Your Majesty, one of the instructors called, bowing respectfully. The children have been asking if you'll tell them the story tonight. Unia smiled, though it carried the weight of recent grief. Tell them I'll be there after the evening meal. She continued her walk, her steps leading her inevitably toward the memorial garden at the Academy's heart. A simple stone marker stood beneath a silver birch tree, inscribed with words she'd chosen herself. Alpha King Caius McKinnon, who proved that legacy is built with love, not blood, may the Moon Mother guide him home. 3 months. It had been 3 months since Caius's funeral, and the wound still felt fresh. The night of passing. He'd died as he'd lived, with quiet dignity and surrounded by those he loved. The sickness had come slowly, giving them time to prepare. Time for final lessons, last stories, whispered truths shared between a father and daughter who'd chosen each other against all odds. On his final evening, Caius had called Unia to his bedside. Darien sat on his other side, her hair now fully silver, her face marked with the lines of a life well lived. There's something I need you to understand, Caius said, his voice weak but steady. When I bought your freedom in that market, I thought I was saving you. But the truth is you saved me. Father, don't. Listen. He squeezed her hand with what little strength remained. I was drowning in my own failure. Letting shame turn me bitter. You reminded me what it meant to lead with compassion instead of pride. You showed me that the strongest legacies aren't written in blood, but carved through choices. His eyes glistened. I am more proud to be your father than I ever was to be a king. Unia pressed her forehead to his hand, unable to speak through her tears. The pack is yours now, Caius continued. You've earned their loyalty 10 times over. Rule them well. Rule them with the same fierce heart that saved them during the night of fire. And remember, his smile was gentle. Remember that you were never a replacement for the children we couldn't have. You were always the child we were meant to have. He closed his eyes then, Darian's hand in one of his, Unia's in the other. And as the moon rose full and bright outside his window, Alpha King Caius McKinnon took his last breath. The howl that rose from Silver Hull Keep that night was heard across 3 territories, grief and honor woven into one sustained note that seemed to shake the stars themselves. They built his funeral pyre in the great courtyard, reconstructed after the night of fire with stones that still bore scorch marks, a deliberate reminder of the price of betrayal and the power of sacrifice. Wolves from every allied territory came to pay respects. The courtyard overflowed with mourners, nobles and commoners, pure-blood wolves and half-breeds, even humans from the settlements who'd found protection under Caius's reformed laws. Unia stood before the pyre in the ceremonial armor of the Alpha Queen, the royal crest blazing on her chest. She was 24 now, no longer the frightened girl from the auction block. Years of training, ruling alongside Caius, and wielding the responsibility he'd entrusted to her had forged her into something magnificent, a leader who commanded respect through competence and inspired loyalty through compassion. Darian stood beside her, leaning slightly on her daughter's arm. Luna had aged gracefully, but grief had taken its toll. Yet her eyes remained bright, fierce, unbroken. "Are you ready?" Darian whispered. Unia nodded, not trusting her voice. She stepped forward and raised her hands. The crowd fell silent, thousands of eyes watching as moonlight gathered around her palms, no longer wild and destructive as it had been during the night of fire, but controlled, purposeful, sacred. Silver flame bloomed from her fingers, and she sent it gently toward the pyre. The wood caught instantly, burning with that unique cold heat that only moonfire could produce. The flames climbed skyward, silver and pure, carrying Caius toward whatever lay beyond. As the fire built, Unia spoke, her voice carrying across the silent assembly. "My father taught me that strength without mercy is tyranny. That leadership means serving those you protect, not ruling over them. That family is not defined by blood, but by the bonds we choose to honor." Her voice cracked slightly. He took a broken girl from a slave auction and gave her a kingdom. Not because prophecy demanded it. Not because he needed an heir. But because of his heart. She pressed her hand to her chest. His heart was large enough to see worth where others saw only transactions. She paused, composing herself. Caius McKinnon was called the Infertile King by his enemies. They meant it as an insult. But he turned it into triumph. He proved that a dynasty need not be born, it can be built. Through choice. Through love. Through the courage to defy tradition when tradition demands cruelty. The flames climbed higher, and the moon above seemed to burn brighter in response. Darian stepped forward, her voice soft but clear. "You are the child we were meant to find, Unia. The daughter I prayed for in the dark hours when I thought the Moon Mother had abandoned me. She didn't abandon us. She was simply waiting for us to be ready for you." Unia turned and embraced Darian, and they stood together before the pyre, 2 women who'd found each other through grief and been reforged through love. As the fire reached its peak, something extraordinary happened. The moon, already full and bright, grew brighter still. So bright that it cast shadows sharp as midday. So bright that every wolf present felt their connection to the divine thrumming in their chests like a second heartbeat. The moonlight poured down onto the pyre, intertwining with Unia's flames, and for one breathtaking moment, the silhouette of a great wolf made of silver fire stood above the burning wood, massive, ancient, divine. Alpha King Caius, acknowledged by the Moon Mother herself. Then the vision faded, the flames settled, and the moon returned to its normal radiance. But every wolf present knew what they'd witnessed. The gods themselves had borne witness to a legacy built not on blood, but on something far more powerful. The coronation of Worth. The formal coronation took place 1 month later, after the traditional mourning period. Unia stood before the assembled packs in the reconstructed Great Hall, now adorned with new banners that bore a unique sigil, a wolf and a crescent moon intertwined, representing the union of earthly leadership and divine purpose. Sister Moira performed the ceremony, her ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Do you swear to lead with wisdom and strength?" "I do." "Do you swear to protect the weak and challenge the unjust?" "I do." "Do you swear to honor the legacy of those who came before while building a future worthy of those who come after?" "I do." Moira placed the crown upon Unia's head, not the old crown of the Alpha Kings, but a new one forged specifically for her. Silver and moonstone, delicate yet unbreakable. "Then rise, Alpha Queen Unia of the Silver Howl. May your reign bring light to the darkness and mercy to the forgotten." Unia stood, and the assembled wolves erupted in howls of approval and loyalty. When the noise finally subsided, Unia raised her hand for silence. She had something to say, words she'd been crafting since her father's death. My father once told me that the strongest rulers are those who remember what it was like to be powerless. I will never forget the auction block. I will never forget the chains. I will never forget what it means to be judged by blood rather than character. She let her gaze sweep across the hall, nobles and commoners, purebloods and hybrids, all united under one banner. From this day forward, no wolf in the territories under my protection will be judged solely by their lineage. The old laws that divided us, that called some bloodlines pure and others cursed, are abolished. We are all children of the Moon Mother, regardless of what flows in our veins. Shocked murmurs rippled through the assembly, but Unia continued. The era of bloodlines is over. The era of worth begins. Prove your value through your actions, not your ancestry. Earn your place through competence, not birthright. This is the legacy my father died to establish. And this is the kingdom I will build in his honor. She drew the ceremonial blade and held it high. Let the other territories condemn us if they wish. Let them cling to their old prejudices and ancient hatreds. We will show them a better way. Not through conquest, but through example. Not through force, but through the simple, radical act of treating every soul with dignity. The hall exploded with sound, some cheering, some arguing, all of them passionate. But through the chaos, one sound rose above the rest. Captain Rowan, now commander of all Silverhull forces, slammed his fist against his chest in salute. For Alpha Queen Unia. For the new moon era. The warriors took up the cry, and gradually, the entire hall joined them. For Alpha Queen Unia. For the new moon era. Darian watched from her seat of honor, tears streaming freely down her face. Her daughter, the girl they'd found in chains, was reshaping the world. Epilogue, the howl that changed everything. That night, Unia stood on the highest rampart of Silverhull Keep, looking out over the territories that now called her queen. Darian joined her, moving more slowly these days, but still sharp as ever. He would be so proud, Darian said softly. I hope so. Unia leaned into her mother's embrace. Some days I feel like I'm still that terrified girl on the auction block, waiting for someone to realize I don't belong here. You belong here more than anyone, Darian assured her. You understand what leadership costs because you paid the price yourself. You understand mercy because you needed it desperately. You understand justice because you've lived through its absence. She turned Unia to face her. That's why you'll be the greatest ruler this kingdom has ever seen. Below them, the pack was gathering for the evening howl, a new tradition Unia had established. Every night at moonrise, the entire pack would howl together, their voices rising to the stars in unity and purpose. Unia and Darian descended to join them. As the moon crested the mountains, Unia threw back her head and howled a sound of grief and hope, of loss and promise, of a legacy that would echo through generations. The pack joined her, thousands of voices blending into one sustained note of defiance and devotion. The howl rose to the heavens, carrying with it the story of an infertile king who proved that dynasties need not be born. The story of a girl with moonfire in her veins who transformed from slave to savior to sovereign. The story of a family built from broken pieces and forged in the crucible of love. And in the space between the mortal world and the divine, the Moon Mother herself fell silent, listening, bearing witness, acknowledging that sometimes, the best destinies are the ones we choose for ourselves. The era of bloodlines had ended. The era of worth had begun. And Silverhull Keep, rebuilt from ashes and baptized in moonfire, stood as eternal proof that the most powerful legacy is the one we build with our choices, not our birth. The howls continued long into the night, echoing across mountains and valleys, reaching every corner of the wolf territories and beyond. A song of revolution. A hymn of hope. A promise that mercy, courage, and love could reshape the world. And it all began with one simple, radical act. An alpha king who saw a girl in chains and chose compassion over indifference. Everything else was simply a consequence. What he did left all silent, not because of power or conquest, but because of something far more revolutionary. He proved that family is what we make it, legacy is what we build, and the strongest chains are the ones we forge through love.